we've grown accustomed to sometimes ignore what should be considered elevated behavior. And this House has to start to be the example of that higher level of behavior for the society.
Madam Speaker, where the past has indicated a practice, that past anticipated a practice that would work. A practice that will be efficient and will be enabling the Parliament to function in a more vigorous and rigorous way. And what have we found, Madam Speaker? What have we found? We've found that in the last 5 years, this is a record of these sessional committees that have been headed by the opposition. And in the spirit of the rigor of which I speak, and the determination, Madam Speaker, to ensure that this Parliament does not behave the way other parliaments have, and that we set a new standard. What I'm making now, Mr. Speaker, is a point of a little shame. Madam Speaker, is a point of a little shame to me. Because in 5 years, the only 2 committees that have met on an average of more than 3 times for the year have been, as a matter of fact, none except the PAAC, which has been used, as we know. And I was chairman of PAAC. And I was chairman of PAAC. The fact is, Mr. Speaker, in the 5 years since 2016, the PAAC met 84 times. The PAC met 15 times. The internal and external committee, chaired by the opposition, met 14 times in 5 years. The economic committee met 9 times in 5 years. The HR committee met 23 times in 5 years, and the infrastructure committee 9 times. Tell me now, Madam Speaker, is that efficiency? No. Is that the effective way of utilizing the resources of this wonderful House? No. Well, we need to change that, and that's the reason for this standing. So be it resolved that notwithstanding Standing Order 3, and in accordance with Standing Orders...
point of information. Yes. Madam Speaker, I really know that my friend didn't mean it. But certainly he would be aware that the committees could not meet in the premises that were designated, which is the Parliament, because of lack of space and lack of scheduling. Also is a House leader contending that these committees are not oversight committees, because that would be a tremendous departure from what we know them to be. And that was the intention of Prime Minister Golding at the time, that whether it's infrastructure, economy and production, that these are oversight on the government's operations.
But the Prime Minister will comment on it. But I think that every policy that is determined has an outcome that it anticipates. The then Prime Minister anticipated efficiency, and that indeed the oversight function would be carried out and would be carried out well. He did not anticipate this poor performance, this abysmal performance of the committees. And certainly, Madam Speaker, this could not in any way inure to the benefit of the public who have sent us here to do their business. So the Prime Minister wishes to make a comment on it, and
thank you, Prime Minister.
Hold a moment, please. I would appreciate if Minister Bartlett completed and we wait until public business to go into a detailed debate on the matter.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I think it is good order that we should complete the resolutions and then we debate afterwards. Yes. So resolution 4 says, notwithstanding Standing Order number 68.3, and in accordance with the Standing Orders number 68.1J and 73E, this Honorable House appoints an Ethics Committee.
We are today departing from an established policy and practice by a JLP administration, which was a good practice.
Point of order, Madam Speaker. The member for East Kingston and Port Royal says we are departing from an established policy position. Can the member make reference to any aspects of the Standing Order or any such resolution or motion that was passed in the Parliament that gives rise to the point he's making? Just to make it clear, clarity for the House. You're right.
Madam Speaker, in court, people refer to judicial notice having been given, but the Speaker can, in fact, attest to the fact that this has been an established practice since 2007. And we all here, yes, are derived from a policy that the then Prime Minister had stated quite eloquently, and we agreed. And what is that, Madam Speaker? It is recognizing the role of the opposition as the appropriate oversight body within the Parliament. And as such, it wasn't confined to the PAC nor to the PAAC, but to all the other sessional committees of this Parliament. The House Leader, in our interaction, and I must say that so far our interactions have been good, and I want it to continue in that, but I believe it will, based on our respect for each other. But I really want to urge at this time, especially with the Prime Minister in the House. Yes, you have adjusted and removed the ministers from these committees, accepting the oversight nature of the committees. And it would be totally inappropriate for ministers to sit on these committees. So too would be members of the administration, the government side. And I urge that that be addressed so that the opposition will retain the chairmanship of these committees. And I also ask the government, in relation to the number of persons on the committee from the opposition side, that it is within our power as well to enlarge those numbers, as I had indicated to the House Leader in a note to him some time ago. So, Madam Speaker, I'm urging that we retain this practice that has worked well for us, and I make that submission.
Madam Speaker, this innovation that was introduced by former Prime Minister Bruce Golding was an innovation designed to enrich our democracy, strengthen our Parliament as an oversight body in relation to the executive. It was a positive and enlightened position that he took. It was supported by the then opposition, and when the then opposition became government, they continued it. When the government changed again in 2016, it was continued. The primary aspect of this which concerns me is the question of who chairs these committees. The practice which was established of the opposition naming the chairman gives the oversight function greater robustness. It has worked well. The question of efficiency, that's a mixed situation, because we all know that there's a single chamber that all the committees compete for time. PAC and PAC are typically given priority. And certainly the PAC generally meets fortnightly, so as to give the committee clerk an opportunity to produce the minutes and so on, and to give the technical officials and the Auditor General and so on a chance to function, so they're not there every week. The PAC has been very, very active throughout the 5-year period you referred to, Minister. We're now in a situation where the government has 49 members of parliament, the opposition has 14. It's a situation where they have a supermajority in the House. It is a situation where they have many backbenchers who, many of them are new MPs, and their presence on the committees will give them an opportunity to learn the procedures and functions of the House well. So the standing orders which mandate that there should be no ministers or ministers of state on sessional committees is for good reason. It's part of the oversight function to keep the executive off the committees and let the legislators deal with that as an oversight body. You have ample backbenchers, and the standing orders require that you use them. So the amendment that you proposed, we salute you for that, Minister. It is appropriate, it is indeed required by the standing orders. The practice of having opposition persons appointed as chairman of these sessional committees, it was never enshrined in law. The standing orders were never amended to make it a permanent feature of the law, but it was followed for successive administrations. And now, in a situation where the governing party is so dominant in Parliament, and in situations where the opposition on some committees will have one member, many of them will have two, and I think in 3 of them will have 3 members. The government side will have 10 sometimes, 8 sometimes, 9 sometimes. The dominance of the process by the government side is not in keeping with the spirit of Bruce Golding's enlightened position, and the committees will not function, I think, in accordance with their best practice, which is to make them vigilant oversight bodies. I know from the government's perspective, it's not convenient to have that type of oversight because it can be annoying, and it can be, if it's covered in an adverse way, it's adverse publicity and so on. But we need to, I think, raise our consciousness above that and see that for the democracy that we're in, the richness of it, the maturity of it, we should not step back from a practice which was instituted, ironically, by that side. And it was a good innovation. It has worked well, and I think Jamaica has benefited from it. So I'm very saddened, Prime Minister, I'm very saddened that you have chosen to resile from that practice at this stage in your second term. I don't think it's a good move, and I urge you to reconsider it, sir. And I think that we should stick with the practice and ensure that the committees function as best as possible as oversight bodies of the executive. It's going to be very difficult with the diminished numbers on this side, but with the chairmanship, it gives you a little bit more opportunity to ensure that the way in which the committees function is in keeping with the desirable situation that they provide effective oversight to executive action. I think resiling from that practice is to be resisted. I feel very strongly about this. I urge the Prime Minister to give some time to rethink it, and let us agree to continue a practice which has worked well. Efficiency of the committees will always be undermined by the layout of Gordon House with a single chamber, and where cabinet is on Monday, so we can't meet on Monday. Senate is on Friday, we can't meet on Friday. The House sits in the afternoons on Tuesdays and sometimes on Wednesdays. So there's very little committee time, and priority by convention is given to the PAC because of its constitutional role and the PAAC. Other committees find it difficult to schedule time. Until we get a new parliament, we will be plagued by that problem. And it does affect adversely the efficiency of the committee. But we shouldn't compound that by eliminating a useful and salutary practice introduced by Most Honourable Bruce Golding, which was to ensure that the oversight function is strengthened by having opposition MPs chair those committees. I urge you, Prime Minister, to reconsider this position.
Madam Speaker, the comments by my colleague from South St. Andrew, I stand fully with. Prime Minister made the change because of the commitment to the oversight function of the Parliament. One thing we can never take away from former Prime Minister Bruce Golding he believes in the role of the parliament. Right? Yes, I've said it before and I've said it again. I'll say it again. The changes were made then. At the time in 2007, Madam Speaker, when, though they were not codified in the standing order, yes, it wasn't done, but there was an acceptance across the aisle, and both sides accepted it. That was enough. On the other hand, there were ministers of state in the executive that served on the committees that were prohibited by the standing order. But because of the composition of the parliament, the then government need more members to be on the committees, and that's why we never bark at that quote-unquote breach of the standing order, because we understood then that the then government had a small backbench and they needed to complement the composition of the committees by members who were not on the backbench. I respected that and I appreciated it. In 2011, the then government had a supermajority, 2-1, 42-21. Notwithstanding that supermajority that we had in 2011, those provisions that prevail as of 2007, introduced by former Prime Minister Bruce Golding, were respected.
It's called principle.
Because we accepted it when we were on the other side. And I'm saying to you, Madam Speaker, there were some members on our side who wanted to change it because we were in power then and we should exercise the power. Collectively, we took the position that principle must prevail over expediency. And so we respected the provision and we adhered to it, to the T. We adhered to it. We never used the majority that we had, that super majority, to ram down what we wanted because the principle stood supreme. We both traveled that road, both sides. That's why I'm a bit disappointed that when we are supposed to be improving, to developing the democracy, ensuring that the oversight, that when I heard the Prime Minister spoke about integrity and transparency in here, I said, boy, there is some hope. This is a retrograde step. This is a retrograde step. This is a blatant abuse of power. We had it before. We could have used it. We never did. So I'm appealing. You have the majority. You can make whatever decision you want. But I appeal in the interests of governance for our country, not our party, our country, that the government revisit. And I was more appalled when I heard my good friend made a comment to justify this travesty. He said the PAAC was used by the opposition in the way it did. And if what came out of, nothing that came out of the PAC was in a breach of any standing order. Nothing came out of the PAC was a breach of any law. And then to blame the PAC for what happened?
Shame.
Right?
Shame.
To blame the PAC for light which have been shone on practices in government, and that is to be covered up or to be denied. It's sad. So in closing, Madam Speaker, I'm closing. Power is one thing, you know. So when you have it, be careful how you use it. It can be a boomerang. Right? So as I said, the majority is there. But I urge, I plead to the Prime Minister, I plead to my friend, the leader of government business. Put Jamaica first. Put Jamaica first. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker, I am pleased that the Prime Minister is here and will probably speak on this.
Members.
Madam Speaker, because the frustrations outlined by the member from South St. Andrew and again supported by the member from St. Catherine South was real, very real and palpable, which is the constraints that is inherent in the existing parliamentary setup. It is well known. It is a reason we use oftentimes as a best case for a new parliament, which is simply that what exists was not designed for a modern parliament. And one of the weaknesses was the meeting room, the sufficiency of space to meet. But to compound that, we talked about the time, the limited time that was available for members. And many a meeting we've set was cancelled. The record does not show how many meetings were set but had to be cancelled because either a committee meet, a number of times PAC members, a chairman had to come to me to say, look, we need the time. And we made way. But Prime Minister, you have spoken eloquently about the governance structures and about the integrity in government. This really is an opportunity to demonstrate the seriousness because the use of the number of times that committee meet to justify this is a subterfuge. It really is a subterfuge because of the fact that we simply don't have the structure to accommodate it. But let me say this, let me tell you why I know it's a subterfuge. In the last parliament, the attempt was made then to abolish the practice. And that was resisted at the time. And there was a pullback from that. However, what was done was how the committees were then operated. We had a situation where half the meetings, the start of every meeting was taken up about procedural issues that was intended and designed to frustrate the functioning of the committee. And it happened in this way. First of all, the government members would invariably argue that the agenda can only be set by what came out of the parliament, what came out of the resolutions in parliament, and that determined the agenda. So if the House did not approve it, then you couldn't set any separate agenda. That was one way in which to narrow the scope of the activities of the committee and to frustrate the functioning of the committee. So we took note of the fact that the government then attempted to abolish the committee, the chairmanship of the committees. Then, when it was resisted, they simply changed tactic and then limit the scope of the function of the committee. And then now to use the comment to say the committees didn't meet because the economy and committee met only 9 times. Really is to communicate the ideology of power. The ideology of power that is being practiced by this administration. And Prime Minister, it is too early in this new administration to be taking that position because it is said the same knife that stick sheep, stick goat. And I'm saying it is a subterfuge and it is very transparent as to what is taking place. And I remind the country and the parliament that this was attempted last term. True. And it is simply a rehashing of that exercise at the beginning of this term. Prime Minister, an attempt. Prime Minister, I ask you to pull back from that and do not sully your good record on governance issue. Good record on governance issue so far. Please retain the best practice. Retain best practice. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank the members for their contribution. We expected that the opposition would make a case for maintaining the practice which had evolved since 2007. I would want the members to reflect on the practice that existed before 2007, indeed from the inception of the House, where committees were chaired by government members. Indeed, the leader of opposition business mentioned the important function of Parliament, and that is to exercise oversight on the executive, on the government. And that point was a theme of the presentation of the opposition, oversight. And that in some way, by allowing sessional committees to be chaired by government members, that in some way we would be diminishing the oversight of those committees and weakening the role of Parliament in keeping the executive in check. If we were to strip away the impassioned plea and look only at the reasoning of the arguments, it would quickly be agreed by any reasonable person that there is no standing in the arguments presented. Madam Speaker, forgive me. The PAC, which was the first committee to be given the chairmanship of the opposition member by the standing orders, was done so because it was realized that there was an alignment of interests, and therefore it would be best served that a committee that looked at financial probity, that looked at keeping the government's accounts in check, that committee should be chaired by an opposition member, so that there is no possibility of a confluence of interests to cover up any issue or to in any way use parliamentary power to avoid scrutiny. And that is why it was agreed, and it is common parliamentary practice through almost all parliaments, that committee in particular is always chaired by an opposition member. What we are proposing to do, Madam Speaker, is not to interfere with that. That will be maintained. I recall bringing to the Parliament a resolution to reinstate or to activate the Public Accounts, the Public Administration Appropriations Committee, the PAAC. And when that resolution was finally accepted and activated, the then government gave the chairmanship of that committee to a government member. My recollection was that Easton Douglas of blessed memory was the first chairman of that committee. What we wanted to achieve then as the opposition was to have even greater oversight of government business, in particular how the government's budget was being expended in the year that it was approved. And we recognize that having a government member chairing the committee, we were not getting that impact. And I believe that that would have also influenced the position taken by former Prime Minister Bruce Golding. When we became the government in 2007, former Prime Minister Golding made the concession, starting, and I believe, inspired by the situation with the PAAC, to have all the sessional committees chaired by opposition members. And I agree, it was a noble gesture. It was one that was well intended to improve oversight. And I agree as well that the PAAC, the Public Administration or Appropriations Committee, should remain under the chairmanship of an opposition member. Because, again, the alignment of motivation. You would not want for a confluence of interest to prevail and then somehow subvert the oversight of Parliament by, for example, not scheduling meetings to examine government functions. Now, I want you to walk with me down this road, because the opposition in the last session of Parliament found it possible, with limited space, no special room dedicated for holding PAC meetings, but they found it necessary to allocate all their time to the PAAC and some time to the PAC. No time to the Economy and Production Committee, no time for the Infrastructure Committee, no time for the Human Resources Committee. Why? Why is it? Is it just so that we can... You had your chance to speak, member.
Please, members.
Now,
Prime Ministers.
by the very argument that somehow oversight is defeated because of limited space, by the opposition not calling the committee meetings, not seeing to them being held, they, Madam Speaker, have defeated oversight. They, Madam Speaker, are being hypocritical and trying to mislead the public. Because oversight, Madam Speaker, is not merely or only or singularly on the fiduciary matters, not merely on the budgetary matters, not merely on the financial matters, but there are policies and programs for which the government has committed to in its budget, for which the government would have presented to the public in their manifestos, programs, policies and programs that are of great importance. But there is no alignment of interest for the opposition to hold the government to account, to bring those programs to fruition, hence the government gets the benefit. I go back to my original point. Madam Speaker, I go back to my original point. When the House was structured with the standing orders, those who founded it understood this principle, and which is why it was structured the way it was. Oversight is not only, and that's 45 years, by the way, 45 years before it was changed. Oversight is not only the purview and the responsibility of opposition members. That is the falsehood in their argument. Oversight, Madam Speaker, is the responsibility of every parliamentarian. It is the responsibility, particularly of the backbench. And the backbench is not defined by opposition members only. The backbench includes everyone who is a non-executive member of the government. They too have a role and a duty. What is it that we are trying to create, Madam Speaker? What is it that we are trying to create? We are trying to create a parliament that functions, a parliament that works, and a parliament where every single member of parliament can execute their duties and roles effectively. There is no attempt here, no attempt whatsoever, the issue of oversight. The government is not just the executive arm. The government has statutory agencies and bodies, and they submit to the parliament on a regular basis reports. Reports which the only use that sometimes they have is to decorate some of our bookshelves, because they are hardly ever read. They are hardly ever reviewed. What I intend to do, Madam Speaker, and I've already given direction to the House Leader, is that every single report from a statutory body that comes here must be assigned to the relevant sessional committee for that sessional committee to review it. So they will have work to do. I don't intend to have 49 members when you take off the executive and have this massive backbench sitting down in parliament banging on desk. All of them will have work to do. All committees will be functional, and their role will be to ensure that the government keeps the commitments and the promises that it has made, because the interest is aligned in that way, and that way we will see greater accountability. Madam Speaker, there is a sense sometimes in the way in which the opposition speaks, as if accountability and probity and high moral standard is their exclusive domain. As if the government of Jamaica is intent on somehow tricking the people or operating in a way less than the people's expectation. That will not happen under my leadership. It will not happen in this government. There is no deviation from the commitment to have the highest level of integrity, of dignity, and efficiency. Our action is integrous. It is in keeping with what is in our standing orders. Our action is dignified. We are giving greater meaning to the role and function of parliamentarians. And our action is efficient. More work will get done, and there will be a greater level of accountability and probity. I put it to you, Madam Speaker, that our actions are appropriate, in order, and in the public's interest.